Hi, and welcome back to Animals 2 by 2, where we do a week-long study on different animals. And remember, this week we are working on snails. Okay, so just a quick reminder, our lesson objectives that we're going to be looking for at the end of the week is that you're able to observe the structure and behavior of land snails in a terrarium, the structures and behavior of water snails in an aquarium, communicate your observations of the two kinds of snails, and compare the similarities and differences of the two kinds. Make sure you're always looking to have those observations of the natural world and know that they're descriptors collected using your five senses. So, your sense of sight, your sense of hearing. If you're able to get a hold of any of these animals in the wild, your sense of touch, smell. Please don't taste them. And I hope that you're raising questions about the natural world and discussing this with family and friends. Okay, so what you'll need is just your book handouts that you should have received on Monday. We are going to go over one of those pages today. Pencils, crayons, markers, pens, whatever you feel comfortable using to take notes, draw pictures, and complete your worksheet. Once again, you're always encouraged to have a piece of paper to take notes and draw pictures so that you can reference that back from earlier in the week. Okay, some vocabulary. We'll be talking about aquatic snails today. Land snails are just a common name for a mollusk. A mollusk are invertebrates, meaning that they do not have a backbone. They have a soft body that holds a heart, liver, digestive system, and other important organs. Gastropods are any of the large class of gastropods Poda and mollusk, such as snails and slugs, usually with a univalve shell or none, and a distinct head bearing sensory organs. Okay, so our investigation this week is on land and water snails. And yesterday we explored some on the land snails, and we're going to do a quick review of that and just go over some of those body structures we hit on quickly yesterday, and go a little bit more into detail on that. And then we'll begin with our water snails investigation. While watching, I want you to draw or write down the important information that you learned so you can reference it later. Like I said, we are going to go back and review some from the land snails yesterday and go over that body type. And then we'll begin with our water snails or aquatic snails today. And just heads up, tomorrow we'll be doing some more work with the aquatic snails. So you may want to be taking those notes. Okay, the land snail in review. Land snails kept as pets really need to be kept in a terrarium with plenty of moisture and leafy greens to eat. And to make sure that they have a healthy shell, you're going to want to give them some broken up eggshells or clean white chalk periodically. It really helps them build up that hard outer shell. Snails can easily escape from your terrarium, so you must always keep a secure lid on them at all times. They can easily climb up the sides of that aquarium and crawl right on out. If you do acquire some snails as a pet or you're keeping them, please do not, I repeat, do not release them just anywhere. They must be released back to where they were collected, because we do not want to make them an invasive species in an area that they should not be in. Also, there is different ways to humanely euthanize your snails if you are not going to keep them as pets, and to keep you from introducing them to environments that they will be invasive and bothersome to plants and plant life. So keep that in mind. They typically live about around 2 years. So if you're going to get one as a pet, make sure that you are signed up to be taking care of them for that amount of time throughout their whole life. Okay, what are the parts of a land snail? Well, we have the shell. I think that's probably the most identifiable piece that we all are accustomed to seeing, especially around this area. Um, Then we have the mantle, the head, the eyes, the upper tentacles, the foot, the mouth, the lower tentacles. And, and remember those eyes, they don't use them to see very well because they don't really see quite well out of those. But they are still there, and we need to be able to identify where those are. Okay, so if you would get out your page 13 worksheet, what are the parts of a snail? On this page, I went ahead and started it a little for you, just to give you some idea. Remember, I'm not an artist, I'm a teacher, so not the best representation, but we always just want to try our best. Nothing has to be perfect. We get better with practice. Just do your best to draw a snail from memory. I did add a few labels, and I'm going to give you some time to finish labeling that. So if you see, I wrote shell on the shell. I drew the eyes and labeled those and the upper tentacles. Then there's some other body parts where I've drawn out a line for you to fill out. I'm aware that we probably don't have all of the pieces memorized at this point, but these are some of the main ones I want you to be able to identify easily. And then once you've drawn those and labeled them, go ahead and write me a sentence about it. I started you off just in case you're struggling to find one, but I want you to write about it. What do you see? What do you think is important? Just give me some details that you've learned so far. I began my sentence with the land snail has, just because you should always start off with a full sentence, and I'll finish that up on the next slide. Make sure when you're writing your sentence, you're starting with a capital letter, because we always start a sentence with a capital letter, and using any punctuation as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and change slides. If you have not finished your page, go ahead and feel free to pause the video and complete your page, and then flip over and hit play to check your work. Okay, so we're back. I hope you guys paused the video and finished up your page without skipping on to the next slide. But now we're just going to look at the spots that we needed to fill in. So we have the foot of the land snail. Remember, that's on the bottom. The head, the mouth, even though we don't see it very well from the top, from looking from above the snail, it is there. And the lower tentacles. These are the important features of the snail that we need to be able to identify. And then I just finished up my sentence. The land snail has a foot, eyes, tentacles, head, and a shell. Those are really some of the main parts. Notice I did use a capital letter at the beginning of my sentence, spaces in between the words, commas to separate, and a period at the end for that punctuation. You may go ahead and pause the slide and finish up. If you need to correct anything or fill in some missing spots, please do so now, and then start us back up when you're ready. Okay. The water snail. The aquatic snails are a bit different from the land snails. Now notice I said the water snails and then I used the aquatic snails. We call them the water snails, but really the aquatic snails are going to be a more accurate verbiage on them, or a more accurate name. The aquatic snails do lay eggs just like the land snails, but they're smaller and they're deposited on the surface of plants and rocks or aquarium walls in a gelatinous mass. Aquatic snails glide along on a mucus trail like their terrestrial cousins, but it's hard to see the trail in the water. Okay, so our occasionally, our aquatic snail will travel up and down mysteriously throughout open water. In actuality, the snail is gliding on invisible strands of mucus. Most aquatic snails lay eggs. Like I said, they're smaller than that of land snails, and they're in that gelatinous mass. Again, the snails hatch out as tiny additions of the adults. to go about their business of eating decomposing plants and animal material and scraping algae from the solid surfaces with their radula. So they're actually eating that algae off the bottom and different surfaces. So when you're caring for your water snails, they're very easy to care for. All you need is a container of aged or chemically dechlorinated water, conditioned water like we talked about when we were studying goldfish and guppies. Keep plenty of aquatic plants in the aquarium for them to eat and to lay their eggs on. Water snails also eat lettuce, spinach, and zucchini, or fish feeding cakes and tiny bits of flake fish food you can buy at the aquarium store or a pet store. Although water snails eat waste material and algae, thus helping keep your aquarium looking clean, it's best to add fresh water once a week to keep them healthy. Be sure to use that conditioned water. You can keep your snails in an aquarium with fish or even in their own aquarium, or even a jar or other clear container will work fine. Just remember to give them room. They require very little attention. Just maintain that water level and add a bit of food every now and then. Hopefully, with any luck, you will have an ample permanent supply of snails that you can watch and learn from for quite a while. So while you're observing this video of all these different types of aquatic snails, I want you to be thinking about, where are the water snails in the aquariums? Are they floating in the water or holding onto the sides? Well, some of both actually. Does the water snail have a head, a tail, eyes, and a mouth? Keep looking to see if you can find it. Notice this one's floating at the top. That's where they've brought oxygen into their shell and closed up so that they will be able to float or be buoyant. Be thinking about if your water snails have shells, a foot. Does it have tentacles and a feeler? You should be able to be making these observations in this video and really be thinking about it. Okay, so stay tuned. Come back tomorrow for lesson 4. We're going to investigate water snail structures and begin our comparison of the land snail and the aquatic snails. So tomorrow come back and we will look at the different body parts of a water snail or an aquatic snail. They're a little different than land snails, but I hope to see you soon. Thanks, you guys.